Well, we're back for another episode in the temporary studio, which is the second bedroom of our house. And we're going to continue on with this folder I found recently, Sharpshooting and Trick Shots. And today's episode, we're going to find out a really interesting story about the guy who invented the gun sight on a gun, as well as the percussion cap. And wait till you see what he wasn't even a hunter. He wasn't a outdoorsman, a woodsman. Wait till you see what this guy did for a living. The guy who invented the gun sight. Crazy. Before I dive in to this week's episode, please hit the bell to subscribe, hit the button to like, and by all means leave a comment, especially if you know any of these people that I'm covering, if they were a grand uncle or a grandmother, or if you have anybody in your family that was an expert marksman. Some great modern day stories of marksmanship and sharpshooting. And help me. Your engagement goes a long way to helping me bring back this iconic brand for the 21st century. Welcome back. This is Jeff Hicks, curator of the Strange As It Seems archives and grandnephew of John Hicks, who created Strange As It Seems back in the late 1920s. So what I'd love to do today is just continue on. If you'll join me for this week's episode, we're going to dive further into sharpshooters and marksmen, trick shots, and so forth. So to kick this episode off, I'm going to feature a sharpshooter that was first featured in 1933. His name is Major John W. Hessian from New Haven, Connecticut. He scored 20 consecutive successive bullseyes at 1,000 yards with a rifle. This guy was really an amazing shooter. From New Haven, Connecticut. This was from the Wimbledon match of the Far Southwest Rifle, Pistol, and Shotgun matches in El Paso, Texas. He broke 2 world's records simultaneously with this feat of shooting. This is back in 1933. And then Ernest Hicks featured him again in 1947. As I mentioned in last episode and many times before, John Hicks passed away on D-Day, June 6, 1944. Had nothing to do with the war. He had myocarditis, I guess, an inflammation of the heart. And his brother, my grandfather, Ernest Hicks, took over. He featured John Hessian again, and I guess at this time he was retired, but also mentioned that he scored 98 bullseyes out of 100 shots at 1,000 yards. And check this out. The last shot, the bullseye, was aimed 23.5 feet to the right to offset a 45-mile-an-hour wind, and apparently that's kind of what he was famous for. I love this. There's some old the Western Union photographs here. Making new picture of Hessian for Ernie Hicks today in Clearwater, Florida. We'll send you a possible next week, and sure enough, here are the photographs. These are great of Hessian. That Robert Hessian sitting there as well. This is, again, after he was retired, but apparently he was just an amazing, uncanny ability to judge and make allowance for wind. Also won him the Marine Corps Cup, Camp Perry, Ohio. This was back in 1913 with scores of 97 out of 100 at 600 yards. So yeah, he was born in 1877. Several letters here from Steve Hannigan Publicity. We've been trying to devise some method of working a Winchester credit into the John Hessian item. For your information, the rifle he used when he established the 1913 record was an Army Springfield 30-06 caliber. So that's no good. I guess they were trying to he was the publicity guy for Winchester. The rifle which he is posed in the pictures is a Winchester, but we can't see any honest way mention could be made of that fact. Probably the best bet would be to refer to him as a retired Winchester crack shot, which he is. So I love that. The publicity guy is trying to get the Winchester arms into the story. And here's another ace shooter that appeared in this folder multiple times. Apparently he was quite a famous fancy shooting expert. Another guy that draws pictures with a rifle. I think we featured that earlier as well. But Captain A.H. Hardy, so the first fact appeared in 1931 that he was drawing pictures with a rifle, and I have a letter here from Captain Hardy. I love this too, the old Peters Cartridge Company. Ammunition you can shoot with confidence. So that's the first letter that he got from A.H. Hardy. And then he started getting all these letters. There are maybe 2-3 dozen letters from Captain A.H. Hardy and his own finest custom-made gun cases, belts, holsters, and leather novelties. So incredible, really amazing. A lot of photographs that he sent as well, many of which were returned, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. We also have another one here. Captain A.H. Hardy, pistol expert, hit a turkey target 3 times in 15 shots with a .38 caliber service revolver. This is at a distance of 300 yards. And how about this photograph for a trick shot, right? Apparently he used it's written on the back, executing a difficult shot using a watch case for a mirror. Shooting over his head. Crazy. Another photograph of A.H. Hardy there with his stance as a shooter. That's, again, just the tip of the iceberg there. We've got more Captain A.H. Hardy. This is later, I think in 1940 or so. Beverly Hills, California, shot at 1,000 consecutive 1-inch marbles thrown 15 feet in the air and only missed 8. How about that? Shooting marbles out of the air. Crazy. Another great photograph here. Love that. Of the amazing Captain A.H. Hardy. And let's see what else we got in here. There's another one of him shooting. I think that was used for the illustration. And then I noticed too that, I hit 992 and 1,000 in marbles thrown in the air at a 15-foot rise using one repeating rifle. This is the repeating, right? Winchester Model 90, shooting Peters 22 short semi-smokeless cartridges, and during the entire test did not clean the rifle. And yet again, this is great. I love this. Captain A.H. Hardy, again from Beverly Hills, this is 1941, hit 12 consecutive loaded 22 cartridges ejected from the same gun. It's a feat never equaled. So he would shoot, eject the cartridges, and he had a way of popping them up in the air, and then he'd shoot the cartridges. And it was a little confusing. And so I love this. People would write in. He always said, write in for corroboration. So here's a postal telegraph, basically cable, right? The old-fashioned cable. Misunderstand May 12 item on shooting cartridges. Please explain. William Loss, and then is sent back via Western Union. John Hicks did. Hardy ejects loaded cartridge, giving gun a slight flip, causing the cartridge to fly 10 feet into the air. Stop. He then fires and hits cartridge before it reaches the ground. Stop. His specialty built 22 repeater holds 25 cartridges instead of the usual 15. Stop. Suggest explaining further in story. That's great. I love this. Just back in the old days, getting corroboration through the Western Union telegram. One thing I loved about A.H. Hardy is he not only promoted himself quite a bit with sending a lot of his trick shots and accomplishments in, but he also promoted some of his students and people that he was teaching to shoot, many of which were women. This is great. I have a letter here from 1939. Refer back to your letter with reference to the possibility of getting a picture of Mary Quinn, one of my star pupils in pistol shooting, now in the Caroline Order of Alhambra. How about that? It was impossible to get her picture in the dress of a Carmelite order. They would not permit it. But I have another girl, 17, living in Woodland, California, has not only established new records for women in pistol shooting this year, but defeated all male shooters recently in San Francisco, which includes our own LA police crack shots. How about that? If you're interested, I'll be glad to supply. And her name was Gloria Jacobs, 16 years old, the California women's pistol champion. She scored 279 out of 300 in a high wind with a .22 caliber pistol, defeating the entire field of male shooters. Amazing. Gloria Jacobs. And that was just one of many female marksmen sharpshooters that were featured. This goes all the way back to 1931. Check this out. Edith Pritchard of Pollitt, Vermont. She's an intercollegiate rifle champion. She didn't miss a bullseye in 28 consecutive matches. Kind of amazing. And I love this. It first came from Universal Pictures Corporation. I've mentioned this several times. Universal was doing in the kind of early mid 1930s. This is from 1931, and I would love to, if anybody can help me locate there. I think they're on nitrate, which is probably pretty hard to store, right? Apparently it's highly flammable, but there's 150 Universal film shorts. I'm going to have to find them someday, but I do have a few of the Columbia shorts that were kind of late 1930s here on the YouTube channel, so check those out. But here from Universal Pictures Corporation, Director of Publicity Paul Greelick. Here's a record which I cannot authenticate, but I don't think that the University of Vermont Bulletin would print it unless it were true. Thing about it is I don't know whether it's a world record or not. So pretty amazing. I love this too. Dear Sir, this is the letter from John Hicks to Sergeant R.T. Connor, the women's rifle team, University of Vermont. I would appreciate all the information possible, including the number of shots fired and blah, blah, blah. He was enclosing a envelope. He got a letter back. Very short descript from Raymond Connor, Staff Sergeant, and he said, Dear Mr. Hicks, the young lady in question does not desire publicity. And strange as it seems. So you would have thought that was the end to it, but it looks like back, and then later in July of 1931, there was an article in Grit. I love this too. In the picture is Miss Edith Pritchard, a senior at the University of Vermont, who is the winner of the women's intercollegiate rifle title, scoring 595 points out of a possible 600 for a record. Miss Pritchard scored a perfect 100-point score in each of 22 intercollegiate matches this year. It would be dangerous to get in Miss Pritchard's way. Love that. From Grit, which was the newspaper. I think it was like a rural newspaper. Tons of articles that were in the files. I think that was one of the favorite sources. So I guess he figured that, and along with the mention in the November, was this November? Yeah, I think it was in the, this is, from the University of Vermont records. So I guess he figured it was public information. He was going to print it even though she didn't want publicity anyway. But the first woman featured, Edith Pritchard from Vermont. And we're just getting started with the famous or amazing female crack shots here. Here's Arlene Brown. This is 1935, also in the John Hicks era. 16-year-old pistol expert. She scored 100 consecutive bullseyes at 20 yards. Some really cool articles too from the Atlanta Journal from 1932. Check that out. And also the New York Times. Crazy, 1932 as well. The 298 out of possible 300. But the amazing shot, Arlene Brown. And in 1939, we have Mrs. Esther Sichler. That's kind of tough to say. Esther Sichler. From Los Angeles, she hit a 3-inch bullseye 20 consecutive times at 25 yards with a .38 revolver for the only perfect 200 score ever made by a woman. 1938, and here's Mrs. Esther Sichler. Holds the world record for women. This is tough to say all this, and I love this article in the LA Times with a photograph of the bullseye, the possible 200 scored with a .38 weapon in the Elysian Park competition. Amazing champion there, Mrs. Esther Sichler. Love her too. The modern Annie Oakley. Check out Betty Bradshaw, who until 3 years ago had never fired a gun. And then last year, this is in 1942, she won the world's championship for women in combat shooting. In exhibition, she fires at a hatchet blade between two targets, splitting the bullet and breaking both targets simultaneously. Check out the picture of her. I guess they had put a bunch of photographs that had to be sent back. Would have loved that. But I do have an awesome letter from Betty here. I'm enclosing several shooting pictures which she requested. On the back of each, I explained the shot, and it's true. Till about 3 years ago, I had never shot a gun and discovered my ability quite by accident. Amazing. While shooting at tin cans with an air rifle. And then in 1939, I won second place in state competition. Then I took up combat shooting. And in this, the contestant walks away from 3 human silhouettes, and at a given signal, at a distance from 10 to 30 feet, the gun is drawn, and the contestant shoots 3 shots while turning and running toward the target, all of which must be accomplished in 1.5 seconds. Crazy. In April 1940, I won the world's championship for women in combat shooting. The .38 Colt revolver was presented as the trophy by Sheriff Eugene Biscayles of Los Angeles and actress Irene Rich. Then I became interested in exhibition shooting, the pictures enclosed. I love this. She said, we have our own attractive uniforms, and each woman has bought her own gun. That's pretty cool. And then here's the article with her in the attractive, quite attractive uniform. Woman discovers phenomenal marksmanship completely through accident. Betty Bradshaw. And the last woman featured here, which brings us finally to the era of Elsie Hicks, my grandmother. She took over the comic strip in 1948 when my grandfather Ernest passed away. He died in a plane crash, and she took it over, and she featured a great woman shooter here, Lucille Chambliss from Winter Haven, Florida. She was the 1954 National Women's Pistol Champion. She's only started shooting 6 years ago. So in the late 1940s, she's the first woman in the U.S. to become a member of the U.S. International Pistol Team. That was in 1953. And have here awesome letter from Lucille Chambliss with all of her accomplishments. I'm 24 years old, have been shooting since 1948. All of her championships, the National Midwinter Pistol Champion, Florida State Pistol Champion, Southeastern Region, and then the National Women's Pistol Championship, 1951, third in 1952, second in 1953, and then first place in 1954. And of course, the fact there at the bottom, first woman to become a member of the U.S. International Pistol Team in 1953. All right, we're off and running in the era of Elsie Hicks. She loved history. Oftentimes in the 1950s, she'd go back and find some really interesting facts in history. I think she was quite the reader, too, my grandma Elsie was. And here's a really interesting, the invention of the first gun sight was in percussion caps, is credited to Alexander Forsyth, and he was a Scottish preacher, strange as it seems. He was a minister in Aberdeen, Scotland in 1807. Amazing. The percussion cap, first major improvement in firearms in 200 years, as well as the first gun sight invented by a minister. Here's another guy from history, Mike Fink. He was an early Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania Ranger. Such a good shot that he could shoot a tin cup full of whiskey from a man's head at 70 yards. Got here the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. With kind of a couple of the references that it came from. really additional reading on this guy. One of the excerpts, I gotta read this because it just kept cracking me up trying to read it. I'm gonna try to read it out loud. See if you can read it with me. The Mississippi keeler contemptuously flourishes his jug, prances a few steps like a gamecock before a fight, and launches forth on the old boast. Well, maybe you was the high muck-a-muck in these here parts, but you ain't no longer. I'm Mike Fink, the greatest keeler that ever pushed a pole on the old Mississippi, and I've come to claim my rightful place by your campfire. Whoop! I'm a Salt River roarer. I'm a ring-tailed screamer. I loves the winning, and I'm chock full of fight. I loves the women. I think it's women. I'm half horse and half cockeyed alligator, and the rest of me is crooked snags and red-hot snapping turkle. Whoop! I can hit like fourth-proof lightning on every lick I make in the woods. Let's in an acre of sunshine. I can outrun, outjump, outshoot, outbrag, outdrink, outfight, rough and tumble, no holds barred, airy man on both sides of the river from Pittsburgh to New Orleans and back again to St. Louis. Come on, you bar hunters, you lumberjacks, and you cotton rollers, and see how tough I am to chaw. I ain't had a fight for 100 years, and I'm spiling for exercise. Cockle-doodle-doo! That was from the Pittsburgh Story of a City by Leland D. Baldwin, page 144, and Elsie typed that out. It was cracking me up. Here's one with an amazing story. The Human Machine Gun. This was featured by Elsie. It goes all the way back to John Hicks's time. I don't know if John Hicks ever featured him or if it just waited until Elsie pulled this out of the folder, but he was the Human Machine Gun. Richard Gunsling Davidson, Nashville, Tennessee, retired Army sergeant. He could fire 20 shots in 30 seconds from a single shot rifle. And there's the drawing of him, which was taken from this article written, and I even have the corroboration by Robert Wilcox, I guess, from Vermont, who knew him. Gunsling Dave was well known by the old timers, I think better known than such as Bill Cody even. Many would be glad to hear of him. Years to get track of him, but other old timers believe him gone over the divide. That's incredible. This is in 1936. But here's an article by Wilcox, R.H. Wilcox, about old Gunsling Dave. This is the editor of Outdoor Life, and he goes, I believe the younger generation of riflemen, as well as the old codgers, will be interested in a short resume of the career of Gunsling Dave, who in his day was the United States Army's greatest rifleman. Apparently, he got first enlisted in 1886. He joined up in Arizona, tramped the desert sands against the Apaches of Geronimo, eventually captured by General Lawton's cavalry. Later, Gunsling Dave fought San Juan in Cuba, and still later campaigned in the Philippines. In September 1906, he was ordered to join the infantry rifle team. I guess he won a gold medal in 1891 with that team, but he did it all with this 45 caliber single shot rifle. I guess took the national trophy. It's 312 out of a possible 350. He was 9 points ahead of his nearest competitor. A field of 1,200 shooters. This guy was amazing, but he acquired the name Gunsling because the speed at which he handled that single shot 45. The well-known sawbuck position to his own fancy. His specialty was skirmish firing. When he stepped through the strap and crossed over his right knee, his rifle locked as if in a vise, kept his left hand and his mouth full of cartridges, and the object was just to do as much shooting as possible in the short range, approaching and leaving targets. Basically made a machine gun out of that single shot Springfield. He could fire 20 shots in 30 seconds. Amazing. And it was necessary to fire at least 2 shots at each stop going down. Gunsling occasionally would remain nonchalantly erect in the middle of battle, seemingly lost in thought, but when the bugler began cease firing, Gunsling would drop down and clip out the last 2 shots before the note even finished sounding off. Amazing guy, Gunsling Dave. There's a also a photograph of him in military uniform, but one of the old forgotten great riflemen of his day, and I guess in the late 1800s, the greatest shooter on the U.S. military, U.S. Army. Crazy Gunsling Dave. And here's an amazing guy. We always featured handicapped people that doing amazing feats. As strange as it seems, last week we featured a guy with no arms that was a sharpshooter. And how about Lester Matthews here? He was from Ayrton, Alabama. Although he's confined to a wheelchair, he rolls his chair out in the woods for hunting season for squirrels, but he operates a shooting gallery and also can do a bunch of feats, shooting feats as well. Here's a handwritten letter to my grandma Elsie from Lester Matthews in 1952. I'm writing in regards to your letter. I squirrel hunt every season. I get the squirrels with my .22 rifle. I make my earnings by running a shooting gallery. I can stand a postcard up edgeways and split it. Amazing. And the card moving about 20 miles an hour. Crazy. I can cut a thread shooting straight, cut it with rifle bottoms placed against from my head. I can also cut the string shooting backwards over my shoulder. Crazy. Amazing Lester Matthews. And another one here, a great sharpshooter, Hewlett Joe Benner. He's a technical sergeant with the tank outfit in Panama. Apparently he's the first American to hold the world record for rapid fire pistol shooting. In competition in Oslo, Norway, he scored 582 in the rapid fire silhouette match. And I love this. Corroboration letter from the Department of Defense. Edward Cottrell, chief of the Army Press section, talking about first amazing record, world record in competition, Hewlett Joe Benner. And here's the final one from the Sharpshooting and Trick Shots folder. We finally made it through. This is also from the era of Elsie Hicks. 10 shots in a 2677 target. This is fired by Colonel Crawford Hollidge of Boston, Massachusetts, the new official 10-shot 100-yard group record of the National Bench Rest Shooters Association. And we have actually a photograph, or a mimeograph, I guess. What do you call it? A photostat or something back in the old days, right? Of the actual target that Colonel Crawford Hollidge shot out. But here's some pretty interesting stuff here. I think this is when the NRA was really picking up steam. I've got a couple letters here from L.R. Wallach, who was, I think, the head of the NRA back in the 1950s. It says here, called it the dope bag. I love how they still called information dope. The service is one of the benefits of NRA membership. It's one more reason why every gun owner should belong to the NRA. Also, his letter from Wallach and Holmes, right? That was including a photostat. That was the actual size of the record bench rest target, about which I wrote. And also in here he included a couple of booklets. Check this out. Introduce your friends to your association, right? So this is when the NRA was really picking up steam. It's almost evangelical, right? Steady growth builds an NRA, which will give even greater services to every member. Your organization grows stronger each time you introduce it to a sportsman friend. So tell a friend, and when you endorse an NRA application for another good American, because you add another vote in the battle to safeguard your shooting against unwise anti-gun laws. So this is when the NRA was really taking on the NRA's one package service to shooters, reporting service in Congress and all of the state legislatures, guarding against ill-advised gun legislation affecting the hunter, target shooter, and citizen soldier. Wow. So a couple of membership booklets that the head of the NRA was sending out back here in 1953 as the NRA was really picking up steam and taking itself on as a pretty powerful lobbying organization. So that wraps up this week's episode and the last 2 episodes on sharpshooting and trick shots, and I'll finish this episode. Oh, before I do, please hit the bell to subscribe, hit the button to like, and by all means leave a comment. Your engagement goes so far in helping me bring back this iconic brand to the 21st century. And I'll conclude this episode, as I always do, with a foreword from John Hicks's book, first published in 1928, in which he writes in the foreword, "The author launches this book of the curious, in nature and humankind, on the vast sea of public opinion, with the hope that it will fulfill its mission to entertain and acquaint its readers with some of the marvels of the world in which we live."